Hi, for my audio final, I decided to talk about John Dewey. John Dewey was a professor of philosophy starting out in his career, and he decided to move to Chicago with his wife and establish the University of Chicago Laboratory School in 1896 because he decided to turn his focus towards educational theory as opposed to just teaching philosophy, but was able to take his knowledge of philosophy to sort of um, build his foundation for the school. In the foundation for his school, that philosophy was building an education that was more child centered and more of a democratic environment. Which in the 19th century, when he opened the University of Chicago, the traditional philosophy behind a school and the traditional values were to teach obedience. The schools really valued modesty amongst their students. The students were doing very like rote learning, taking notes, sitting behind the desk, and they kind of saw education as just a preparation for the future instead of a process. Learning wasn't really a process; it was just to prep for jobs. And so when Dewey introduced this, what they call a progressive movement of educational theory, um, people in the 19th century were sort of turned off by it. It seemed too radical, too risky. It brought a lot of concerns about how it would change the character and morals that were being instilled in the children at the time. What was most interesting about Dewey to me and why I decided to focus on him is that he seeks for ways to encourage independent thinkers, and this is really reflective in what education is geared towards right now in our time, and a lot of how we focus a lot on differentiation in our schools. He looked at the social environment, which Vygotsky really portrayed in his theories as how that affects a child's learning experience. And he also really um, was thought that real life experience, like doing experiments and having real life experiences in the classroom and even outside of the classroom, was going to foster that sort of independent thought process and then eventually just amplify the entire learning process as a whole. So one of the main reasons that people were really turned off by Dewey's philosophy of education was that they saw they think of a democratic school environment as being something that the kids are running around free to do whatever they want and there's no structure and there's no discipline. It's actually quite opposite of what Dewey really believed. Yes, he believed in freedom of curriculum, but that's that sort of freedom that comes from differentiation, that freedom for the teacher to observe their students, understand this each individual student's thought processes, how they learn, their strength in learning, looking at like what we look at now, multiple intelligences, and then designing very structured curriculum. So it's not a free curriculum; it's still a structured curriculum that the teachers are designing, but they have the freedom to structure it for each student and to structure it so that it works as a whole for that classroom and based on what the children need to learn a certain concept. So I really think Dewey was trying to say that children need assistance of the teacher in order to make sense of their world, is what the book quoted. And so it's really about finding this balance between structure and freedom. And also, the other major point was being able to teach something that is purposeful. Just because a child enjoys something and learns something better in a certain way. He used an example of a child in a teacher's classroom that was crawling around and meowing, and the teacher was like, "Oh yeah, I let her do that because she enjoys it." And Dewey was saying, "Well, that's what I'm not talking about. Freedom in the classroom. Like if she's just meowing, you have to understand why is she meowing. Is there something at home that she's relating this to? Is it something that's going on in her head that's being expressed that way? Maybe she is really interested in cats and you can teach something that by using cats that will really stick with her. But this teacher wasn't doing anything about it. She was just letting her meow like a cat because she liked it. And that's counterproductive as to what Dewey is trying to teach. It's saying, look deeper into these kids' interests and what drives them, and then formulate a lesson plan that will take that interest and make something of it and have these certain objectives that these students can reach. So it takes a lot of planning, takes a lot of catering to those interests. Yes, it's very child-centered, it's very constructive, um, but it also requires a lot of documentations, a lot of recording of students' progress, um, and the ability for the child to apply all of the teaching strategies that they know to their classroom and those specific situations of each student. So I wanted to move on and talk about a quote that was in the book, and I'll read it here. It says, "The constructivist teacher sees the essential activity as what goes on in the child's head, not in his or her hands." So this child is meowing, and you don't look at for the actual activity. You look at what is going on in that child's head that is coming out in that activity. And so, as a PE teacher, this is really important because PE involves kinesthetic movement and kinesthetic learning. So, any activity that I plan as a PE teacher should be an outlet for a child to express what's going on inside of them and to use that physical activity to, kind of let out what's going on inside. But also, that could be flipped around, and a lot of things that we learn through motion, and through sport and through teamwork and being able to see our competence and being strong or performing physical activity can, on the flip side, support something that's going on inside of your head. So it can really be used as a tool to empower students, to boost their self-esteem, give them more confidence, and then translate that back into the classroom. If they see that they were able to push themselves past their limits, I don't know, something really simple, doing push-ups, maybe they can take that back into the classroom and push themselves a little harder. And so that's where my job comes in, and looking at Dewey's theory of getting really to know my students, what they're good at, and then use that to build their competence. And competence is a huge factor when considering what is going to motivate your students in the end. In the fitness world, that's what works. If somebody finds themselves to be good at something, then you use that as a tool to motivate them for every other aspect of their life, their diet, their lifestyle changing, whether they're addicted to something. You use their competence, you encourage them, and that's how you motivate them to move forward. So that's really a huge tool to be able to use as a PE teacher. I think that's about it. I hope I didn't go too far off the beaten path. It's really hard to summarize this in 5 minutes, and I think I went over. Yeah, hands-on and minds-on. That was the last point Dewey said, hands-on, minds-on. You can't abandon the mind. You can't abandon expression, bodily expression, behavior, decisions that students make. You can't abandon those and focus only what's going on inside. You can't abandon what's going on inside. And it's all about balancing that out.